everyone, and welcome back to another WebDev lesson. In today's video, we're going to be covering more things about arrays. So we're going to be covering some array methods, such as push and pop, and talk about what a method is and how they relate to the data structure we're talking about right now, which is arrays. Last time we talked about an array method called .length, so we're going to kind of expound on that principle and just talk about how you can use these methods and what they are. So before watching this video, you should have completed the exercises from last video, and you should have, of course, watched the last video so that you can understand what's going on right now. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into some code. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a couple array methods that you'll probably use the most. And these methods include push, pop, slice, and concat. These are a few of the ones that I use frequently. Maybe not pop so much, but it's a good one to know nevertheless. Before we start to delve into some array methods, let's talk about what array methods are. So without getting into too much detail, because there's just some things you won't understand at this point, I want to give you just kind of a brief idea for what they are. When we create an array, which looks like this, right? This array comes with some nifty little tools that we can use to do some helpful things with. And in the last video, you saw us do something like this. So if we have, if we say var array is this, right? We give it some properties, and I'll just say, like, I don't know, camel and toast. It's going to be a string, right? And then we say, if we were to say console.log array.length, right? Well, this .length is actually a method on this array, okay? So it would be the same as if we said here .length, and then we actually console logged array. We would actually be console logging this whole thing together, right? So we can use it like that, or we can take this off the end and we can throw it here like this. You can do it either way and you'll get the same result. So basically, length is a really good example for an array method because it shows you, immediately shows you something that's returned. So if I wanted to do this, right, and I run my terminal, here we go, it returns 2, right, because the length of this array is 2. So what we have is the length array method. And let's talk about a few other array methods. So one of the most popular, and one that I use almost on a daily occasion, is push. So what we're going to do is we're going to push a new item into this array. And what happens is when we say, let's say we wanted to say new array, and then dot push, right? And if I say new last item, right, and we do that, what's going to happen is this new string is going to get tacked on to the end here. So if I run that code and then I say console.log, right, new array 1, to see what it looks like, and I say run this code, look what we get. We get an array with 5 items. We have cat, turtle, an array with 2 items, right, which is this array here. And we have new last item. So that's actually been pushed onto the end. All right, so that is push. I hope that makes a little bit of sense, where you're actually pushing an item onto the end of the array. So that is the push array method. Next, we're going to get into pop. And this one's actually fairly simple to understand. So we're going to say var array is this, and we'll have, let's just do numerical values, 2, 3, 4. And then here we'll say array.pop, and we'll pop off the last item. So we'll say array.length -1, and let's console log the result and see what we are left with. We are left with an array with only 3 items. So the way this one worked is we actually popped off the last item from the array, So rather than having 4 items with, this would have an index of 3, right, because it's a 0-based index. Rather than having 4 items and an index of 3, we popped off the last one, right? So now we have 3 items with an index of 2. So that's pop. It's very, very simple. Makes a lot of sense. And you'll hear that a lot when it comes to push. Pop is kind of the opposite of push. Push adds onto the end of the array. Pop takes off from the end of the array. So that's the array method called pop. Slice is another good one. I grabbed this example right from the site that I told you guys about before, which is the MDN page for slice. So we're going to talk about what slice does right now. So basically, if I have an array like this, and then I run slice on that array, what happens is we have, we can imagine that this first argument, right, is 0. Okay, and I'll explain why in a second. But it makes more sense if you imagine there's an imaginary 0 here. Okay, and then we have this 2, right? What this means is these 2 refer to the index of the item or items we're trying to slice off of our original array. So we have this animals array, right, with an index of 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? There's 5 items. The total index of the last item is 4. What we're going to do is we want to slice and make a brand new array from 0 all the way to 2. So what we do is we say animals, we say the array, and then we call the slice method on that array, and we give it coordinates, right? I like to think of them as coordinates. So this first one starts at 0, and the default is 0. So if I were to take that off, it would do the same thing. So this is going to go from the first item, 0, all the way to the third item, which you can see gives us this array here. And we'll actually run this code, and you can see that it gives us that. Oh, give me 1 second. Let me take that off. All right, we'll do it that way. So now we have our camel, our duck, and our elephant. So that is our slice method. And we have our concat. This is probably one of my favorite methods to use. And with this method, we actually can concatenate 2 arrays together. So we're actually going to take the first array and concat it with the second array. And as you can see, the expected output is A, B, C, D, E, and F, because we're going to connect them together. So the way this works is it actually goes in order. So we take the first array, right, and we tack the second one onto it. So it's almost like we went through every single one of these items and pushed them sequentially into this array, right? So we went push, we grabbed it from here, pushed it into here, so now we have D, right? Now we grab the next one from here, E, and we push it into here, right? And so on and so forth. So that's kind of the way that you can think of concat working. So we'll go ahead and run this code. And you can see, there we go, we have A, B, C, D, E, and F. Okay, so what I want to do right now is actually explain a little bit of what I expect from you for this next exercise. What you'll need to do for the next exercise is create a function, and I haven't determined the name for this yet, but you'll have to make sure that the name is exactly what I tell you in the comments. For this particular video, let's just say the name is let's actually say array copier function. Let's just say array copier because it's easier. All right, and that's going to be a function, right? And what I expect this function to do is I expect to use it in the following way. I want to be able to pass in an array. For this example, let's say I want to pass in array 1. And then I want to pass in a new item that gets tacked onto the end of the array. Okay, and let's say I wanted to say new last item, right? And when I return this, when I console log this, right? If I were to console log the result of this, what I would expect and what needs to happen, and if I could spell console correctly, that would be great. what needs to happen is that this new array gets returned with this new item tacked on to the end of it, right? So I would expect to see an array returned that looks like this. Give me 1 second. There we go. And it would say new last item, right? Oops. Just like that. So I would expect an array like that. What I would not expect is that, and this is the rule, right? This array should not be equal to this array. What do I mean by that? They look almost identical, right? And they are, in most ways, identical. What is not true is that if I tried to say this, right? If I tried to make a statement like this, and we'll talk about if statements in just a little bit, right? In the next module. If I tried to say, is this the array returned by this method, or function rather, is this array exactly equal to this array, right? They shouldn't be the same. And what that means is they shouldn't share the same place in memory. I know this is a little confusing right now, but this statement should return false, okay? Because these two should not be exactly the same. They don't share the same place in memory. What this means is this array, okay, let's say it shares this one spot of memory up here. When this gets returned, it returns a brand new array. It does not return the old array from the old place in memory. What this means is that if I were to change something about the array that's returned here, it does not change this original array. I will give you some hints. What you might want to set up inside the structure of your function. Let's say this is our function, right? I'll make this a little easier in case it isn't clear and in case there are questions. Okay, this is inside the function, and no, this is not proper syntax. What I would recommend is that you say new array, right? Or you create some sort of new array, and then at the end you return that new array. Okay, I'm not going to give you any more hints than that. In fact, that's quite a large hint. But this is how your function should look. Now, there are a few rules. You have to use at least 2 array methods for this. So try and use the array methods we discussed in here, but you have to use at least 2 array methods, okay? And you should, of course, return an array that is not exactly equal, that does not share the same place in memory with this last array. All right. So hopefully that exercise makes sense. I could have written it all out, and I'll probably still write it all out, but I wanted to explain it in this video so that you'd get some better context, and so I could just kind of verbalize it, because I think that that helps to understand a little better. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and move on to the wrap up, and then once that's done, you can get started on this exercise. All right, everyone, nice work. You made it to the end of the video. I hope array methods make a little bit more sense now and that they didn't confuse you more than you already were confused. So what you'll do now is you'll go ahead and move on to the next exercise for this video. And I did briefly break that down in the video, so hopefully the exercise is fairly clear. This concept of things being in 2 different places in memory and not being completely equal to each other can be a little confusing sometimes. Maybe I can try and break it down for you a little bit. So what I'm going to do is kind of draw up a little bit of a diagram. If you already understand this, you can skip ahead to the end of the video, but I do want to just kind of briefly break down what's happening in case it's still unclear to you. Basically what we have is we have this array, and we'll say string, right? There's an array, and we have another array that looks exactly like it, right? And let's say this is var R1, A1, and var A2, right? So now we have 2 arrays, 2 variables, okay? And if I tried to do this, right, let me move my camera down a little bit. If I tried to say is array 1 exactly equal to array 2, right, this should return false. Okay? This should return false because they're not the same. They don't hold the same place in memory. This is stored at a different location than this is stored at, right? So if we were to compare them, that would return false. Hopefully this idea makes a little bit more sense. If it doesn't, just bear with me right now and just don't try to understand it completely. Just assume that this is the guiding principle behind what you're doing right now. It might make a little bit more sense later on in the future, and it's actually going to come into play when we start getting into more complicated calculations and functions and all kinds of things like that. So for now, let's just assume that this theory, this idea is correct, and based on that idea, okay, use this idea to solve your exercise. All right, cool. So spend a little bit of time on that. That's awesome. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and end the video, and you can go ahead and start your exercises, and we'll see you in the next video.